Stephen Shore, EDD. Short list of his accomplishments include board member of Autism Society of America, President Emeritus of Asperger's Association of New England, professor at Adelphi University in New York. He's an author, an international lecturer, and you also serve on the USAA advisory board.
That's correct.
Where on earth do you find time to do all of these things?
Well, I like to think of splitting my week into half of it, usually the beginning part of the week, is spent at the university, at Adelphi University in New York, doing professor-ish type stuff. The second half of my week I spend at home with my wife up in Boston. And the third half of the week I spend at conferences, just like this. And they're not supposed to add up because they don't.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very educational, three halves. I'm so glad you found time in your third half of the week to join us today.
It's my pleasure.
You are one of the keynote lecturers this weekend. What message do you want people to take home from your lecture?
The message I want people to take home is that there's a myriad of approaches, and research should be focused on matching best practice to the needs of children on the autism spectrum. And sometimes I see too much of a focus on one approach being better than another. But really what it is one approach may be better for a particular child at a particular time.
Why did you personally get involved with USAA?
I am personally involved with the USAA, 3 A's, because Larry really puts his heart and soul into the conference, and I really am impressed with and respect his efforts in being inclusive and getting the information to parents, professionals, and other who needs it in a non-biased fashion.
What advice can you give to the, I'll use the word typical, because who's normal? What advice can you give to the typical potential job interviewer, coworker, service provider, educator, someone who may encounter or interact with an adult with autism out in the job market or in everyday life?
My suggestion is to look at what the person is able to do. Look at their job skills. Autism, I like to think of autism as being a study of extremes. So that means that while there may be some challenges, particularly in social interaction, and especially when it comes to interviewing, just look at the work of the person on the autism spectrum, and often you'll find it to be very impressive.
You obviously had warrior parents to help you with your struggles as you were diagnosed atypical development with strong autistic tendencies. Do you have advice for parents today who are struggling with their child's challenges?
Well, my advice is to believe in your child, accept your child for who they are, but it's also important to realize that there may be many challenges that need to be overcome with the myriad of interventions that we have today. And by looking at who the child is, by looking at their strengths, by applying appropriate interventions for their child's particular situation, I believe we now have the know-how and technology so that people on the autism spectrum leading fulfilling and productive lives can become the rule rather than the exception.
In your book, Beyond the Wall, you have a chapter called Music for the Child with Autism. How does music help the ASD children communicate?
Well, music is great for a whole number of reasons. As for communication, I found that for children who seem more severely impacted and may be nonverbal, music may be the means of communication. For those children who have some verbal ability, music will help spur that along. For those children whose verbal ability is intact, Music may act as a sort of organizing carrier signal in which to manage communication. The reason that I give music lessons to children on the autism spectrum is that because in addition to all the therapeutic benefits that a child receives by engaging in music, it also gives them a real-life key in which to develop interactions with others and get involved in the community. Additionally, people with autism need to have fun. And finally, I haven't figured out how to teach typical children yet, so I just stick with the autistic ones that are much more predictable.
Thank you, Dr. Shore. I appreciate the time that you gave to us this weekend.
Oh, my pleasure.